Welcome. Welcome to Together Women Rise's July webinar. I'm Colleen Kill, and I'll be your moderator tonight. And I serve as the volunteer chair of our regional leader committee. Before we get started with our presenters tonight, I just wanted to go through just a couple of Zoom reminders you probably already are familiar with, but just as a quick reminder. Number one, please keep yourself muted while our speakers are presenting. And number two, there's going to be a Q&A after each speaker. So if you can enter your question into the chat function, we'll do our very best to get to as many questions as we have time for. This is a very special milestone year for Together Women Rise. 2023 is our 20th anniversary. We began in Greenville, South Carolina, thanks to an amazing collaboration with our co-founders, Marcia Wallace and Barb Collins. Today, we are a powerful community of women and allies dedicated to achieving a global gender equality. We have hundreds of local chapters across the United States where members learn about gender equality issues, give grants to organizations that support women and girls in low-income countries in the global South, and build community and connections with women around the world. I encourage you, all of you, to please visit our website at togetherwomenrise.org for more information and ways to get involved. So now it's time to turn to our first of tonight's speakers. Each month, Together Women Rise features a project that addresses one of the many challenges faced by women and girls in low-income countries in the global South. We award these projects a featured grant between $35,000 and $50,000. And together, at this month webinar and chapters all across the United States, we learn about the country, the challenges, and how the project we are supporting will help women and girls with global gender equality. This month, we are partnering with Tomorrow's Women. Tomorrow's Women trains young women from Palestine, Israel, and the United States to be strong and compassionate leaders who partner to resolve conflicts and inspire action that promotes equality, peace, and justice for all. This featured project builds a community of practice by and for young women peace activists from Gaza, Jerusalem, West Bank, and those living in Israel. Led by alumni, the project will provide retreats and workshops featuring emotional resilience, emotional resilience, trauma healing sessions, leadership workshops, and survey taking and listening sessions. So first of all, we're going to play a short video about the project, and then I'm going to introduce our guest speakers from Tomorrow's Women. Kia?
I'm Amira, the co-director of Tomorrow's Women. We made this workshop from Palestinian activists about the challenges and fears that they face in joining peace
Kia, can we stop it over?
It's not showing up?
No, it's just showing the Together Women Rise website.
Oh,
We're
let me
hearing
try
the
again.
voices. We hear
Yeah,
the
we're-
voices, but we're not seeing anything.
Oh, apologies. Let me try this again. I thought. Do you see a black screen?
We
Yes,
do.
now we do.
Okay, this should be it then.
There we go. That's it.
I'm Amira, the co-director of Tomorrow's Women. We made this workshop to hear from Palestinian activists about the challenges and fears that they face in joining peace-building work. We gave them a safe place to share their stories and brainstorm ideas to overcome these challenges.
I am from Women of the Sun organization.
I come from Middle East Entrepreneurs of Tomorrow organization, and I want my sisters and brothers from the other side to learn more about the reality that we are facing. And despite the backlashes, we still want these workshops and we still want peace.
2011, I joined Tomorrow's Women organization as a camper, and now I am an official facilitator.
I wanted to be the change that I want to see. And share my story because I feel it's important to start somewhere, and this is where I want to start.
I want to share my story with other Palestinians who live in Jericho, Jaffa, Nablus, Al-Nasra, Haifa, Bethlehem.
I need to renew my knowledge, my skills, and to gain more.
I'm really happy to participate in this unique workshop that was funded by Women Rise Together and cooperated with Tomorrow's Women organization.
I want to know and to learn from different stories and experiences.
I like listening to others' people's point of view. Since I joined Tomorrow's Women organization, they trained me to be a leader.
I can speak to people better than before, and I can stand up and say the truth without being scared of facing the consequences of that.
I discovered something about my fears, and I talked about my fears for the first time in front of people. Facing this kind of fears was so important for me.
In this workshop, we focused on the compassionate listening, entrepreneur, and for sure fun activities for the girls.
I like this experience, especially because it was in Arabic, so it was easier for us to express our feelings. And since we used to talk in English, we used to say half of what we needed to say.
I want to make a project that includes sessions on how to negotiate to defend our rights and existence as Palestinian women.
I really want to have sessions that teach Hebrew to Palestinians and Arabic to Israelis, so we can break the language barrier.
I want to raise awareness campaigns and activists projects about peace building by connecting with local NGOs.
I advise other girls to participate in such a program so we can achieve social change as a change maker in our country.
I want women to rise together.
I advise women to come together to shine.
Be the change you want to be.
Find someone who can hear you, never judge you.
We are the women of tomorrow.
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 Thank you, Kia. Tonight, We are so pleased to have Terry Burnett, the Executive Director of Tomorrow's Rise, and Gita Sino, the Tomorrow's Women Development Director. And before I give your quick bio, I do want to say congratulations. I understand you also are celebrating 20 years. So it's a huge milestone. Congratulations to you both. Terry brings more than 18 years of nonprofit policy and program experience with a background in community social work. She graduated from University of Boulder with an undergraduate degree in women's studies and the University of Denver with a master's in social work. She focused on program implementation and design for international social work and a specialization in trauma. Currently serving as the executive director of Tomorrow's Women, a feminist organization that is empowering the next generation of social justice and peace activists in Israel and Palestine through leadership, compassionate listening, and creative arts. We also have, previously she developed nationally recognized mental health and wellness microfinancing and sustainable farming initiatives for refugee families working within the Lutheran Family Services Rocky Mountains. Born and raised in Lebanon during the Civil War, Gita is a dedicated peace builder and has nearly 2 decades of experience in fundraising, focusing on grassroots and community-based organizations. So welcome, Terry and Gita. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Colleen and Kia and all of those Together Women Rise. We're so honored and appreciative to receive such a substantial grant for our organization. We're small but mighty, so funding like this really allows us to expand. I'm going to share a little bit about the organization and the history, and then in the lead up to this pilot project that you all funded. And how successful it's already been. And we're only a third of the way through it from the video that you saw. So you already know my background, but I'm also the mother of a 19-year-old daughter. So I know what it's like to raise the next generation. And it just makes me believe and be really hopeful that the more that we can empower these young people, and especially these young women, the much brighter our future will be. And I know you all share that vision with me too. So, so a little bit about our organization. We're 20 years old too this year. And in 2003, this was started by 3 women, 2 Americans and 1 Israeli. And it was during the second Intifada. So maybe some of you know, have heard of that, but it's considered an uprising. So it was during a very bloody conflict between Palestine and Israel. And these 3 founders said, let's do something different. You know, let's bring young women together outside of the conflict and have an incredible encounter. I don't know if any of you have ever traveled to Israel or Palestine, but, you know, essentially the 2 peoples, even though, you know, they live side by side, some even in the same country, they may never even have any kind of meaningful encounter until university, if ever. So our work is really, really important and critical, and often one of the only ways that these young people will ever really get to meet and connect with each other. So it's really powerful, it's really important, and it's really dangerous at times, frankly. You saw in the video that we didn't show any faces, and that was really intentional. We have a do no harm policy that we follow very carefully when it comes to the identity of our participants. Now, some of those who live in Israel, they don't receive as much, you know, community blowback and challenge as those that live in the West Bank, in the occupied territories, and in East Jerusalem. So for those, we have to take a special care to protect. So a little bit about the history of our organization. As feminists and activists, our founders felt that adults, mostly men, had the floor for decades, and that young women must take the lead because they hold the most promise and potential. And that once those barriers that stem from what we call the double burden of being young and female are removed, all you need is to care deeply and the courage to take the first step. And that's what many of the young women that you saw in that video, that's some of their first, that's one of their first entries into our organization because of this funding. And the one reason why we work only with girls and women is because it creates a safe, immersive space for training programs that will bring both sides together. And they get to see one another not as strangers with conflicting goals, but as neighbors with similar hopes and dreams. And now that we're 20 years into our work, we have hundreds of alums, and they continue to use their new skills, dedication, and compassion daily to forge a path for coexistence, reaching thousands of individuals. We do a lot of public speaking engagement because we want them to take the change that they've experienced out into the world. That's part of the impact that I'm going to share with you. And that just as our founders envisioned, each young woman in her own way is leading the way to peace. We really, truly believe that. So I'm going to share a little bit of the impact, but you probably heard the term compassionate listening pretty regularly in the video and even in our bios. And a lot of people don't know what that is, right? Maybe some of you are social workers or counselors. You've heard of the term active listening, right? Compassionate listening goes a whole other level deeper. And that's really listening from the heart. And it's also being a witness, right? Being able to like separate yourself from what's going on. And I know in these sort of politically volatile times in our own country, it can be really hard to hear someone's, opposing version of events, of facts and of political views. So you can imagine if you are steeped in this from childhood, as Israelis and Palestinians are, it's even more difficult to hear something from the other side. And that's where compassionate listening really comes in. So it's a methodology that we didn't come up with. The Compassionate Listening Project is an amazing resource. I encourage all of you to explore it. But we've taken that, and we know the founders. We all kind of grew up together in a way as organizations, but we applied it in a way that really meets the needs for these young women. We also teach it to our community members. We annually have compassionate listening workshops. And then from that, we go into the emotional resilience, as Colleen mentioned. It's really critical. So if these peacemakers are going to continue with this work, they have to have the ability to carry on, right? So I'm sure you all watched the news recently, right? With the operation that happened in Jenin. I mean, it was horrific to watch, right? A lot of innocent people were affected by that. And so, I want to share one story with you that my staff shared with me today. So we have these groups of Israeli Palestinians. They're in a WhatsApp group, kind of like a social chat group. And this is a group that had gone through our camp together. So even before we do something like the program that you funded, they'll come together in a camp. And they bonded, okay? But then when a situation like what happens in Jenin, there's they can really break apart. But what happened, one of the young women from Palestine said, I can't take it, I can't take what's happening. I don't know if I believe in this. And then her counterparts, her cohort came together and said, we get it, we understand. These are the hardest moments that we face as peace builders, but stick with us, stay with us, believe in who we are and the human connection that we've created. And then she, the Palestinian girl kind of came back and said, you're right, I am committed to peace no matter what is going on around me. And to us, that's all the validation that we need in the world for our work. But I want to fast forward now to the project that you all funded. I don't want to go into detail. You kind of get a sense of what it's about, but it's really important. And we're kind of leading the field in a way by creating this uninational space. And when I say uninational, that means just Palestinians. So a lot of peace programs, they're in English, right? Because you need sort of some common language. But it's so, you can imagine if you speak a second language, how much easier it is to emote and describe and, in your own language. So the fact that they could speak Arabic, the fact that they didn't have to travel across a border, which is really difficult, the fact that they got to eat the food that they're used to and be with each other, really powerful, because it can be so isolating for these peace builders, especially when they're in the occupied territories. There's a ton of social pressure to not talk to Israelis, right? To not connect with the other side. And we all know that any kind of peace agreement, it's going to happen because of conversation, because of connection, because of compromise, and because women are at the table. So really, we met both of those goals in this pilot project. And one last thing I want to share, and Gita, you're welcome to jump in, is that the listening circles were so powerful that they didn't stop. I mean, we kind of allotted like an hour. They went for hours, and we didn't stop them, because to get them even to show up is hard. But once they were there, they realized like how much they needed that community, and that we were able to provide that for them. But one last thing I'll say too is that we see this as a 2-year grant. This first year was building the network, building the cohort, bringing them together, give them the resources to continue and to believe, but to also give them the skills and the opportunity to come up with ideas for what they want to implement. And that's where that community needs assessment was so critical. So from that, we're going to take that, and for the next year, we want to implement their ideas. So whether that's funding from all of you, which would be wonderful, or we'll seek it elsewhere, we're committed to this project, to seeing it through for a second year. And we're so amazed. You know, when you do a pilot project, you don't always know, but this has been incredibly successful from day one. So again, thank you all. And Gita, if you want to share anything.
This was great, but I will share is I was born in Beirut, as you mentioned in the introduction. I was born in a civil war, into a civil war. And I wish that I had an organization like this one that would have, that would have given me the space to formulate my own ideas about the conflict and not necessarily repeat the generational tropes of what my parents feel, what my grandparents feel, but to really think clearly what I believe and how I want my future. And if we can let these girls in Israel and Palestine meet and connect and really have them, the most we can do is let them think independently about how their lives and how this conflict can end. And I think that through this project and all of our work, we've done that. And Terry has mentioned that the barriers for Palestinians specifically, and that's what we're trying to address here. We know that there are barriers for the Israeli young women as well, and we're working on those. But this is the first time that RISE has funded the Palestinian territory. So thank you for the inclusion, for recognizing the pain and suffering that they are going through on a daily basis. And Tomorrow's Women recognizes that this is an imbalanced conflict. This is the first thing that we tell people. We're not treating them as equal in this conflict. We know that this is an occupation, but they need to talk and they need to air it out and they need to think for themselves.
And I see some questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to just respond directly to those.
If you all are done, I can read out some questions for you all to answer. We are getting a few of those in the chat. Sure. The first one is about a little bit about the history of the organization. You mentioned you're celebrating 20 years, just like us. You said there are 100 of alumni. Can you tell us a little bit more about those classes? Like how many classes of alumni have you had? How big are each class? Is it the same every year? Has it grown over the years?
Great question. Yeah, so we are in more of the hundreds of alums. And our organization, we really believe in going narrow and deep. So working with a small group of young people at a time and then sticking with them as they grow into their 20s. So the organization started with a camp. And the first couple of years, there was 2 camps this summer, and each camp was about 16 girls, give or take. And it was always half Palestinians and half Israelis. And of the Palestinians, they also represented Palestinians who live in Israel, because about 20% of Israelis are Palestinian. And then also the other half came from the occupied territories or East Jerusalem, which is kind of occupied, still kind of part of Israel, complicated. because we really see those groups as 3 groups, even though it's half-half. So that's been going on for 20 years. And you know, the sweet spot is 16. Maybe go to 18 girls, but more than that, you really lose the intimacy and the connection of that cohort. So we've gotten really good at what we do. We have an arc to the program, so it's 3 weeks. So we have this camp that's starting July 26th for 3 weeks. And, you know, we go through, it's an encounter, right? So for the very first time, they're sleeping in the same rooms, eating the same food. It's really intensive. And they'll spend 40 hours in facilitated dialogue with Israeli Palestinian. Our staff is Israeli Palestinian up and down. It's really important that we mirror the encounter and the cooperation. And they'll spend 40 hours in facilitated dialogue, also called the crying room. So many will ask me, well, why do you only work with girls? Well, many reasons, but one, girls cry, they don't fight. And for us, there's a lot more you can do with tears than with fists. And so that's how the program really started, probably for the first 10 years. And then we realized how important it was to keep offering programs. So as our girls aged into their 20s, we wanted to keep offering them opportunities, leadership opportunities. And so this community of practice is one example. So we're always responding to what our alums need and want. Other examples are a dialogue facilitation program to teach them, kind of train the trainers. We work in Gaza, so we work remotely, but we also bring the Gazan young women together to meet and do projects. We do social impact projects on the ground. So that's a little bit about the history of the organization.
Great, thank you. We've had a couple people ask, how do you find people to participate? You know, if you're not advertising, you're not sharing, you know, their faces, your do no harm policy, how do you get people to attend and recruit them?
Well, the last few years, we've had between 50 and 70 young women apply for 16 spots. So, you know, it's not a problem of outreach or recruitment. And a lot of it is word of mouth, right? So they tell their friends, they share with their communities. But we want to build capacity in communities so young women can come together and they have friends and connection, because that's important for the resilience piece. But we also want to spread around the country and throughout the occupied territories. So we're always looking for diversity of religion. We're looking for diversity economically. We're looking for diverse religious views and political affiliation, because that's what they're going to face as they go into the world. So we want to really represent that. And then the last thing I'll say on that is that we also will go into schools in Israel. We can't do that in the occupied territories because it's not allowed by the Palestinian Authority. But in Israel, we can go to English teachers, because we're looking for those with good English, and then we're looking for those with leadership capacity.
Thank you so much. We also have a few questions about, you know, what kind of lifestyle these girls have. Are there threats to some of these women who participate? Do they keep it secret from family or friends?
Yeah, this is a really important question. So for a long time, like we changed the name about 3 years ago. It was called Creativity for Peace, which is a very beautiful sentiment, and it very much represents the ethos of our organization, because we use creative and therapeutic arts as well as dialogue. But it was really problematic for the young women, especially in Palestine. They changed the name to Creativity for Palestinians, because they couldn't even use the word peace because it's so politicized. So that's just one small example. But one time, this is sort of a tragic story, but we had a French journalist came to the camp and interviewed the girls, and and this was before my time. I joined the organization. I took over about 5 years ago. Somehow it got leaked to the Associated Press. So as these girls are returning home from camp, they are met with this onslaught of attacks, mostly social media. It wasn't physical, but it was very emotionally abusive about them meeting with Israelis and Israelis meeting with Palestinians. So we've learned from the past how dangerous this work can be for these young women. And that's why we're very, very careful.
Thank you. We're now getting a lot of questions and hopefully we can get to a few more. Another question is asking specifically about the camps that you host. Where are they located geographically and how do you get them to those locations?
So every year except for 2021, during 2020, we had no camp. Sadly, that was the one year during COVID, but 2021, which was still COVID, we had camp there. But for the most part, it takes place in Santa Fe, New Mexico. There's a beautiful retreat center just outside of Santa Fe. For those of you that have been here, we're known as the sanctuary city for many reasons, and it's a beautiful landscape to come and just sort of set down all of that and be on the land and connect with each other. But when we had it there, we had it in just outside of Bethlehem in a kind of area. It's called Area C. So it's a place that Israelis can come legally and Palestinians can come without a permit. And that was really important during COVID.
Great. Our next question is about other organizations that might do similar work, Seeds of Peace and Heart to Heart. Are you similar to them or how do you differ from those organizations?
Yeah, certainly. Those are both sister organizations to us. I would say what makes us most unique is that we work solely with young women and girls, and we stay with them. So we start when they're about 15 or 16, and then our program goes through their late 20s, even a little bit into their early 30s. So that's also really important that we differentiate ourselves. And we work across the border. So a lot of these organizations will just work with what's called civil society within Israel. So Palestinians and Israelis meeting, but we actually work across the Green Line, which is incredibly difficult and complicated for all the reasons I'm describing, not to mention permits. So in order for a Palestinian to come into Israel and even to leave out of the Ben Gurion airport, they have to have an Israeli initiated permit, kind of like a visa, is the best way to describe it. But with the current government, they make it very difficult. It's very complicated. So we're one of the few organizations that also works what we call cross-border.
Great. So we have time for one more question. And I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about the specific project that we're funding, this new pilot that you've talked about, and how it's different from the camps. Is it just focusing on the Palestinian girls or both the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Yeah, this pilot project is solely takes place in the Palestinian territories and working solely with Palestinians. Now, we do welcome Palestinians who live in Israel to come, but it's uninational. So when we say uninational, we mean just Palestinians. And again, that was important so that they could speak Arabic. So the goal of this is to create a community of practice. And that's best practice. And that means that we're building a network, a connection, a cohort, a community of these peace builders. They know each other and they're connected to us. So they have resources, mentors, potential grant funding through some of our other projects. So it's just an opportunity to bring them together. And then we're doing research. So this community needs assessment. We want to take the data we're getting from them by exploring what are their barriers, what are their needs, and then we want to publish that within the peace building field. Because again, these are the voiceless. No one is paying attention to young Palestinian peace activists, and they're critical, right? Because they are going to influence the marriages that they enter, and certainly the next generation of young women and boys and girls that they raise. And so to us, we feel like it's a really key aspect of peace building that's not being attended to.
Excellent.
Gita, do you want to share anything? I want to leave some space for Gita to share on that because it's an important question.
Yeah, I see a question here about how this differs from our other one, just for Palestinians, entirely conducted in Arabic, and it's not online. They actually went for an overnight retreat. So as you saw in the video, and then
all three retreats are in person.
In person, yes. So they're connecting. And one thing that we don't mention very often is that Palestinians don't connect amongst each other. So they're they don't.
Because it's really hard to travel. So movement in the territories, a lot of people think like, oh, there's just the what we call checkpoints on the borders. But no, there's a ton of checkpoints within the occupied territories. So to get from, you know, one part of the country to meet with, one of their fellow friends or activists, they call them flying checkpoints. They might throw up a checkpoint and then they can't travel, or they have to go all the way around for an hour. So it's really difficult. So we provide private taxis for safety and for efficiency.
Well, thank you so much. I know we do have a few more questions, but we do, I think, have to move on for time's sake. Obviously, there's a lot of interest here, so I'll let Colleen finish up our section.
And please feel free. We would love to take, if you want to email us, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Terry and Gita, thank you so much. You are doing such important work. Peace is the answer, and I do believe with what you said earlier, it takes the women and young women to make it happen. So, thank you from all of us. So,
thank you.
We're very, very important. We're very happy to support the fantastic work of tomorrow's women. The next part of our webinar is called Where Are They Now? Feature. And as a part of our 20th anniversary, we're looking back at some of our past grantees. And tonight, we're so happy to have an update from the Grandmother Project. I think some of the longstanding folks like myself remember this. The Grandmother Project received a grant in 2015 and then a sustained grant in 2019 to 2021. It's a very unique and widely recognized for its approach that emphasizes the inclusion of elders, especially grandmothers, in promoting change through culture. It has been very successful in increasing school attendance, reducing child marriage, teen pregnancy, female genital mutilation, and cutting in Senegal. And we are so happy that Judy Obel, the executive director with the Grandmother Project, is with us tonight. Judy's training is in anthropology, public health, and adult education. She's worked for the past 25 years in community programs supporting women and children, especially girls, primarily in Africa, but also in Latin America, Asia, and the Pacific. Her interest is in developing community programs that build on cultural context and resources, including grandmothers. In 2005, she co-founded the NGO Grandmother Project, Change Through Culture, a small organization that works in Senegal and that trains other organizations in change through the cultural approach. Judy has received several awards for her innovative work, including the Global Thinkers Forum Award for Positive Change and the BBC Inspirational and Influential Women Award. Judy, welcome. We're so happy to have you tonight. Bring us up to date on what's happening.
Unmute, there we go. Yeah, thank you so much. It's very much an honor to be asked to share with you, reflecting back on the wonderful support we received from Dining for Women before and Together Women Rise now. I would start by saying that what I am presenting is really on behalf of my committed and very professional team of African colleagues who are fast asleep in Senegal right now. So what I would like to share, first of all, a bit about our change through culture approach, and to share with you the grandmother leadership training that was initially funded by Together Women Rise, that really exemplifies a change through culture approach. And lastly, some lessons learned from that experience that have influenced our work since 2015. Let's see, will we have the PowerPoint slides, Kia? Okay, yeah, go ahead with the first one. So let's see, I'll kind of go like, can you see me, Kia? I'll kind of go like this or next or, okay.
No, I can't see you, so just say next and I'll hit the button.
Okay, good, okay. So why change through culture? I think a critical challenge for all organizations working internationally, also domestically, but really all of my work has been internationally. A key challenge is understanding cultural context and developing programs that build on those contexts. I mean, as an example, a typical Senegalese, even African family, just from looking at this picture, I'm sure you would be thinking about how different it is from families in, let's say, in North America. And excuse me, in this context where we're working, and the grandmother leadership training was part of, with a new component to our Girls Holistic Development Program. Girls Holistic Development, which promotes girls' education and promotes abandonment of child marriage, teen pregnancy, and female genital mutilation and cutting. And so the next slide, very often in programs, well, there was a little child in the picture, there were little girls, there were teenage girls, there were mothers. Very often programs target in a very linear way groups that are at risk, facing one or another challenge that limits their rights and development. But in fact, and as our onion model shows, whether it's girls or women, they are in fact embedded in family systems, in community systems, and in cultural systems, and that are influencing their lives and often limiting their options. And so the point being, the importance of understanding those systems, those contexts when designing programs. Next. And going back to the, going back here to our African family, when we analyze this cultural context, for example, two key features that we find that are often not given sufficient attention in development programs. One is the extended family, multi-generational families, even if they don't all live together, the influence of multi-generations, and the importance of intergenerational communication between often 4 generations. And the second feature of African families really across the continent is the role of elders, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunties. You see several of them here, uncles. And next, an often heard saying in West Africa by a Malian philosopher, Amadou Mpate Ba. He wrote that in Africa, when an elder dies, a whole library has burned down. You may have heard this saying in the past. This saying alludes to and really reflects the role of elders, the importance accorded to their knowledge and experience, really across Africa and in fact across the non-Western world. i.e. Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Pacific, and also indigenous communities in North America, Australia, and New Zealand. And so, yes, the importance of elders. And next, and when we're, and specifically thinking in terms of women and children and girls, really in all African societies, male and female roles are different. And from the earliest days of life, you can see here, grandmothers caring for, involved with newborns. Next, these kind of go quickly, Kia. Here you can see 3 generations, four generations, oh, sorry, not that fast, 4 generations of women. Again, the multi-generational and intergenerational communication and care, connectedness, supporting each other. Next, with young children, the role of grandmothers. This was in a schoolyard. The little kids had been fighting, and there's a grandmother solving, pulling them apart, getting them to talk with each other rather than fight. Next. The role of grandmothers, the relation of grandmothers with adolescents. In fact, really across Africa, very often the role of the relationship between grandmothers and granddaughters is stronger than it is between mothers and adolescents. Mothers who are often very young, very busy, very impatient. And next, and lastly, the role of grandmothers supporting young pregnant women. Here you have a grandmother who's selling fish to generate resources to pay the prenatal visits and anticipating delivery costs of her daughter on the right. So next, so this diagram that I constructed really shows the role and influence of grandmothers across the life cycle, from birth to newborns to young children, school-age children, adolescents, young married women, pregnant, etc. So it was really, through the wonderful experiences that I've had working with other NGOs mostly in Africa, but also Asia, Latin America, and the Pacific, that I really realized over time how important the role of the grandmothers is. And next, and a later realization, the later realization was the role of the grandmother leaders. I think you can see, Kia, go back. Oh, sorry. You can see from these 2 grandmother leaders that they are strong women, influential, being listened to by others, and in fact, influencing not only other grandmothers, but women, children, and even men. Next, let's see what comes next. So, based on the conclusion that the importance of grandmothers across the life cycle, really viewing them as an abundant and underutilized resource, because in spite of the fact that they are really involved across the life cycle in promoting, doing with the knowledge and experience that they have, promoting the health and well-being of younger people across the life cycle. In spite of that fact, there are very few programs addressing those stages in the life cycle that explicitly involve grandmothers. And so for a number of years, I had this wish to be able to develop leadership training for the grandmothers. And fortunately, at a number of years ago, I had met Marcia Wallace, one of the co-founders of, at the time, of Dining for Women. And I think the 3rd time that we applied, we were fortunate to get the initial grant, and then to develop the grandmother leadership training. Grandmother leadership training has 5 key objectives, and these are all illiterate grandmothers. So the objectives are presented to them with drawings. The first one is increasing individual grandmothers' confidence and sense of empowerment. Next. The second objective is to strengthen the solidarity between, you see the same grandmother, strengthen the solidarity, the relationships between grandmothers. Next, the third objective is to increase grandmothers' knowledge of adolescence, of puberty, the changes that that girls go through. They're very aware of the physical changes, but very unaware of the uninformed of the psychological, emotional changes. Next, the fourth objective is to strengthen the way they communicate with girls. The traditional way of communicating with children in Africa really is more top-down. And in the training, we talked about the need to shift from communication based on threatening and scolding to communication based on listening and dialogue. And actually, the first time that we used these drawings and the grandmothers were asked, what do you see? They said, the grandmother is listening to the little girl. And we said, does that happen in your communities? They said, no, we tell them what to do. So that was the fourth objective. And the fifth and last objective was to strengthen the communication, the relationships, collaboration between grandmothers and other key community actors. You have in the back, you have the health worker on the right, you have the imam on the back, you have the village headman, and you have two teachers. So, go ahead. What did we do in terms of designing, how was the training carried out? I think Colleen mentioned, part of my background is in adult education. And so I designed the training sessions. It consists of 8 days of training under the tree training, not in a training room, not with PowerPoints, under the tree training, 4 points, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, 4 different sessions over a several-month period. Using here a game with a facilitator who reads maybe the cards and gets the grandmothers to think and discuss. Next, various participatory adult learning methods, using drawings a lot to elicit discussion amongst the grandmothers. Next, various drawings, and then they would be given rocks and you vote based on what are your ideas about different aspects of girls' education, child marriage, etc. Next. Of course, the stretch and jump time, the little exercise interludes to help them stay awake, probably during very hot times of the year. And lastly, I think singing a number of songs that were written mostly by local school teachers and other local people. I think this is a song that talks about, it's called Karwal, which means solidarity. And it's talking about that grandmothers need to be together in order to collectively support girls and as they grow and develop. So what were the results of this of the training with the grandmothers after the 8 days? Next. Increased confidence of grandmother leaders. 89% said that their confidence had increased. And grandmother Ege, who said, now I can stand on the roof and say what I think with a loud voice, without crying and without trembling. and I no longer hesitate to say what I think in community meetings. Next, in fact, Ege has become a very strong participant in community activities. Increased solidarity between the grandmother leaders and with other grandmothers. 92% said there's more solidarity between us now. And another grandmother said the training helped us realize that we must work together. If we want to be effective, we must have a common idea or objective on how to support and protect our girls. Next. Increased knowledge of adolescents. 100% said that their knowledge had increased. Another of the grandmothers said the information on the changes in girls' emotional and psychological status was completely new to us. Before, we thought that their bad behavior was due to inadequate discipline of them. And that's why we use severe measures, sometimes violent ones, against them. And lastly, I think, improved communications with girls, from threatening and scolding to an approach based on listening and dialogue. And here, 92% of the girls said that the grandmother's approach had changed for the better. One of the grandmothers who said, before, I was very severe with the girls. Now I don't scream nor scold them. I realize that we need to listen more to understand what they are thinking. Now we are much closer. Next. Now we have two, just a minute, Kia. We have two very, very short videos. First of all, of two of the grandmother leaders. This one is grandmother Tobo. Kia, go ahead.
You know, I hate to say it, but we're running out of time, Judy.
They're 20
okay.
seconds each.
Oh,
those
okay.
videos, 20 seconds each. Yeah,
All right.
Komin jewtutan ha min daro iɗum moƴƴani hay moƴƴani hay sukaɓe ɓe nanna ɓe nannaka ɓe hay nannani hay ɓalli ɗi hay ɗuma ɓe wona gotum hay desangal tawi wona gotum tawoy ko ɗum tan fof min bokki ɗum feren saabu a woda ko woni aada tawa kono a wallini gabboɗa ko ɓuuri moƴƴude he maɗa.
Okay, and the second one, it's even shorter. The next one, she's talking about how they're combating human genital mutilation.
Joɗum laarama ala heede ko tampere ɓolde ko ɗum taki min boppi ɗo cukalde ngel jiiɗa ɗo nannake heewani ɗo min mbaɗani.
Okay. Very quickly, a few lessons learned. One, that grandmothers exist in all communities. They're an abundant and underutilized resource. Second, we saw that grandmothers are open to new ideas, can learn and change, and that grandmother leadership training can increase their influence on family decision-making related to girls' education and development. And lastly, that grandmothers are an important resource to increase communication between generations and for conflict resolution in families and communities. And the last slide, in terms of follow-up, what we have done and what we continue to do is replicating the grandmother leadership training in rural and urban areas based on the resources that we're able to access. And secondly, just this last year, we have developed grandmother leadership training for adolescent girls based on African cultural values, inspired to a great extent by the leadership training of the grandmothers. Thank you. Oh, I say who says, before the NGOs did not involve us. When you have knowledge on a subject and others do not involve you in the discussion, you feel hurt in your heart. Now, as grandmothers, we have a feeling of great satisfaction in our hearts. You have recognized our role, you have given us new knowledge, and we're going to renew our efforts to guide young people. That's it. Thank you.
Wow, we all are applauding this, and thank you so much. And we're very, very glad to be able to share what our grants have done for the Grandmother Project and what you have done in leading that. So thank you, Judy, so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to just do a quick wrap-up announcement. Together Women Rise depends on your donation to fund projects like the ones you just heard about tonight that are fantastic, as well as the education and the engagement activities that we do within Rise. So please visit our website, togetherwomenrise.org, to support our mission. You will easily find the donation button, and all donations are welcome, small or large. Anyway, I do want to just mention a couple of upcoming events. So Tuesday, July 19th, Together Women Rise Advocacy Group with Results. It's their monthly webinar, so please register. Also, I want you to know that this is our 20th anniversary. We've got so much going on across the country. Hopefully you've already attended an event, but please visit our website so you can see what's coming up. There are a number between now and the end of the year. Our next webinar is going to be August 3rd, of course, a Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. So hope to see you then. And all the information about our upcoming events, how to join us on the Join Us tab, upcoming events. Here you're going to learn more, be able to register for events, and even access recordings of past events. So that is a great website, togetherwomenrise.org. Go for it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our speakers. Good night. Namaste, everyone.
Thank you. Namaste.